Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jess. I hope you're doing well today. And today we are doing my August reading wrap-up. My cats are fighting on a desk chair. Hang on. I read 6 books this month, and I know what you might be thinking. There are only 5 books in this stack. Well, I have news for you. This stack is full of deceptions because a couple of these are placeholders for digital books that I read or library copies that I don't have anymore. And so let me take those out. 2 of the books I read this month I borrowed from the library, so I don't have them anymore, and one of these is actually a bind-up of 2 novellas, so there are technically 2 books in this one. So I'm counting them separately because they have separate ratings, and I have different thoughts on each of them. So even though I read 6 books this month, a lot of them were novellas, and so I only read 961 pages.
That's it?
Please laugh if you would like. I just read a lot of short novellas this month and I didn't listen to any audio. It was kind of an off month for me with reading. I was kind of recovering from the readathon in July. I was starting some new hobbies and so I didn't read as much this month. Please do not stand on my whiteboard. Thank you. But it's not about the size of the stack, right? So I had a lot of good quality reads this month and I think I was just kind of going for a quality over quantity approach. It only sort of panned out that way, but I will get into the ratings as we talk about the books, and I'm going to start with the first book I read this month. The first book that I read this month is A Treacherous Curse by Dana Rayborn. This is Veronica Speedwell number 3, and I borrowed this one from my library, so I'll put the photo on the side. The Veronica Speedwell series follows our protagonist Veronica, and she is a butterfly scientist. I don't remember the name of what that is called, but I will put it on the screen somewhere. And along the course of this series, she works aside another scientist named Stoker, who is a taxidermist. The 2 of them end up working as a kind of unlikely pair, solving various mysteries throughout the series. Each book has its own standalone narrative, but there is a connecting through line of the side characters and the dynamic between Veronica and Stoker developing in each book. So this was the 3rd book out of 9, but there's also a 10th being written, so it's quite a long series. So far I've been really enjoying the mysteries and the banter, the dynamic between Veronica and Stoker, and I love the historical setting. This one unfortunately was not my favorite of the series so far, but I will elaborate more on that later. So the mystery for this one involves this Egyptology expedition where a couple of the people on this expedition brought back artifacts and a sarcophagus containing this mysterious Egyptian princess. During the course of the expedition, one of the members of the expedition mysteriously died, and another member of the expedition allegedly made off with a priceless artifact, this tiara. That person has disappeared and the artifact is missing, and so the people in charge of the expedition enlist Veronica and Stoker. Well, they had gotten the police involved, but then the police had gotten Veronica and Stoker involved. It's kind of a whole messy dynamic from the first 2 books with a couple of the investigators on the police force, and so Veronica and Stoker end up looking into this missing artifact and the member of the expedition who disappeared and is allegedly the thief of this artifact, and so that's kind of the core mystery of this one. And so there's the secrets of the expedition that are being uncovered, there's this mysterious curse, there's a lot of different things at play in this. Unfortunately for me, it just didn't have the same appeal that the previous entry had. I really enjoyed the 2nd book in this series, and this one just didn't have the same level of intrigue, I suppose. I didn't find myself as invested, and I wasn't super happy with some of the reveals that happened. It was a little predictable. I still enjoyed it though, and I loved seeing more of the dynamic with Veronica and Stoker. We got a lot of juicy gossip about Stoker's past life, and so there was a lot of like interpersonal relationship drama going on, which I think is very interesting. It was really just the mystery of this one that didn't really do it for me. I'm looking forward to the 4th one. I think that the synopsis of that one sounds really interesting. It sounds like it'll be a little bit more up my alley. I still did enjoy this one, and I do recommend the whole series if you find yourself enjoying historical fiction, if you like a mystery, if you like romantic subplots. That was Mochi, by the way. So I gave this one 3.5 stars, and I will be continuing in the series. I'm looking forward to the 4th one. So that was A Treacherous Curse. So the next book that I read this month is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. This is the 1st book in the Singing Hills cycle. It's a series of novellas that feels very much like a collection of folklore short stories, and so this first one introduces a little bit about the world. It is very vague with the world building, I will say, but I think that that will be elaborated on in the next novellas. My assistant has left and now he's laying on the floor. So in this novella, our main character is a cleric who is going to this abandoned royal compound where the previous empress was living in exile. This universe definitely has some very fantastical elements going on because clerics are paired with these talking birds called hoopoe. I watched 2 videos and that's how they pronounced it, and so I'm just going to pronounce it that way, but it's a species of bird and it's a real life bird. I'll put the photo on the side, but they are paired with clerics, and so these pairs are sent all over the world or over the continent or wherever this takes place. They are responsible for documenting stories and memories and information that would otherwise be lost to time if no one was there to document these stories. And so the clerics and their birds, they go out and they gather this information. And so that's what our main character, the cleric, is doing when we meet them in this story. They're approaching this abandoned royal compound called Thriving Fortune. They're going there to document the history and uncover any writings or information or otherwise that would be at the compound. And so they don't expect to meet anybody. They meet this elderly woman who is called Rabbit, and she begins to tell them about the Empress in exile and about how Rabbit was the handmaiden for this Empress. And so every chapter we get some backstory about Rabbit, and we get more information about the Empress and how she came to be in exile and how the Empress was spending her time in exile. And I don't want to say anything more about it because it was very interesting to see what she was doing and plans that were unfolding. And like I said, it feels very folkloric, so I don't want to tell you too much. I just want you to go into it and let Rabbit tell you her story. All I want to say about it is that I really did enjoy it, and while it was short and a little bit confusing at times, I really did enjoy it, and it makes me excited to continue the novellas. At this point, I believe there are maybe like 7 of them that are out. I might be wrong. I'll put the information somewhere on the screen, but it's still in progress. They're still being written. Mochi's in the clubhouse now. Anyway, I hope that someday, maybe when the series is done, they will bind up all the novellas and put them together. They are very short, and so I hope that they eventually bind up all the novellas into a couple books like they did with the Murderbot novellas. That would be really nice. I know I didn't tell you too much about this, but I went in pretty much blind, and I encourage you to go in blind if you enjoy folklore, if you enjoy the kind of slow unfolding of a story that a seasoned storyteller can deliver. And I think that listening to Rabbit tell her tale, I really was just totally enraptured by the whole thing, and I think I read it in one night. So if you enjoy a folklore kind of short story, I recommend it, and I gave it 4 stars, and that was The Empress of Salt and Fortune. The next book that I read is Monk and Robot by Becky Chambers. This is 2 novellas bound up into one, and so for the purposes of the review, I'm going to discuss them separately, but I wanted to show you the bind up first. I think they released the bind up this year, but inside of this is A Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is the 2 novellas in the Monk and Robot series. So I just wanted to show them to you, and also my cute annotations. So I'm going to talk about each novella separately, even though I did read them back to back, so they kind of blur together in my head as one book, but I do have different feelings about each of them. So before I talk about each novella, I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on the world building that we see in this series. So in this sci-fi series, humanity is no longer on Earth, but they are on this moon called Panga, and they may be on other planets, but we don't get to really hear about that. And on Panga, things pretty much continued the same way that they had here on Earth. There was a large focus on large industry, factories, and things like that, and so there was a lot of detrimental effects happening environmentally. But in this futuristic setting, there were not people working in these factories, there were robots. At some point during Panga's history, there was an event called the Awakening, and all of the factory robots gained sentience and awareness of what they wanted and what they want their purpose to be, and so they decided that they no longer wanted to be working in the factories, and they just set off into the wilds and were never seen again. This next part, I'm not fully sure where it falls on the timeline, maybe before or after the Awakening, but the peoples of Panga decided that in order to preserve the environment and prevent the deconstruction of the whole planet, they decided that 50% of the planet would be uninhabited wilds, and then the other 50% would be reserved for humanity. And it's not like, half of the planet and then the other half is all forest. It's kind of interspersed throughout. But instead of having large pockets of society and then small little clusters of forest and untouched wilds throughout, it's kind of the opposite. And even aside from that, there's such a large focus on ecological impact and environmentally friendly building and energy consumption and all this stuff. So I really like the world building. It is a little bit vague, but I really loved the ecological focus of the societies after everything happened with the Awakening and the division of the wilds. The religious system and spirituality is also very unique. It's centered around these parent gods and the children gods, and all of them are based on nature and the elements and the kind of forces that make up all of life, I suppose. And so you do get to see a lot of that as well playing out in this series. So that's just to kind of establish the setting and the society that we're walking into in this story. And so now I'll talk about the novellas individually. In A Psalm for the Wild Built, we follow our main character Dex, who is a monk for one of those child gods. They had been kind of living in the order's religious compound, I suppose, and the story kind of kicks off with them feeling a lot of unrest and questioning their life's purpose and what they need in order to feel happy or content in life. And so they decide to just try something completely completely new, and they leave their religious compound and they pursue being a tea monk instead. In this world, tea monks are kind of like therapists, basically. The tea monks will set up shop in towns or villages, and they will prepare special teas, different blends depending on what the person needs. The person will talk about what's bothering them or what's on their mind or something that they're missing in life. It just kind of provides a little bit of like a spiritual therapy and a sense of calm for the people who visit the tea monks. And so tea monks are a profession that exists in this world, and Dex decides that they want to become a tea monk. So Dex gets this car and all these supplies and sets off to become a tea monk, but that kind of transition isn't as simple as Dex thought, and so they struggle a little bit with becoming a tea monk and the feeling of being kind of inadequate at something that you just started doing or maybe something that's new to you. There's a slight time skip, and in that time Dex has mastered their craft. They've become one of the best tea monks on Panga, and they are really good at what they do, but they're kind of feeling that feeling of unrest again, and like something is missing in their life. Like they just can't feel content or satisfied in their work, even though they should feel content because they love what they do and they're really good at it and all these different things, but they still struggle with that feeling of something is missing. And so this time they set off into the wilderness and try to find that new purpose. As they start to venture into the uninhabited wilds, they encounter a robot. Robots have seemingly not been seen by humans for generations, or at least like a few hundred years, and so Dex is completely caught off guard, did not expect to encounter a robot, and is very confused when the robot declares that it is the ambassador of the robots and has been sent out to kind of check up on humans and see if they are content and what they need. And so what follows is a really kind of wholesome cultural exchange, if you will, between human and robot as Dex and Mosscap venture into the wilds together. They learn more about each other, and Mosscap learns about humans, and Dex starts to learn about robots and what they've been doing in the wilds all this time, and it's a really wholesome little adventure, and I loved watching Dex and Mosscap bond and become friends, sharing a lot of vulnerabilities with each other, and I think that that's where this book shines the best, is with the emotional aspect of it. For me, this was kind of the perfect point in my life to read this because I've been unemployed for a few months. I was laid off 4 months ago, and so I've been struggling a lot with my own sense of purpose, my own sense of fulfillment and satisfaction, and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, what I want to do next. So I related a lot to Dex in this, and I think that's why I loved it as much as I did. I think that it just came at the perfect point in my life. And I think for anybody who is feeling kind of burnt out, needing a change of pace, wanting to find a new purpose, or evaluating your needs and what you need to feel satisfied with your life, I think that this would be a very good read. I think it was a very emotional read just for me because of all the things that have been going on with me. And so I loved this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. I only knocked off a half a star just for a few small things, but I really did love this, and I highly recommend it. So that was A Psalm for the Wild-Built, and now we'll get into A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is the second novella in the bind-up. I'm only briefly going to talk about this one just because the plot continues pretty directly from the first book, and I already talked a lot about the world building and everything for this universe. So really, I just want to touch on some of the themes of this and then give my rating on it. This one still does talk quite a bit about purpose and finding what satisfies you in life, and Dex's emotional arc of trying to find contentment with life is still going throughout this one as well, and so that is a continued theme. But this novella, I feel like, kind of focuses a little bit more on Mosscap as a character. This one deals a lot more with identity and personhood and belonging, as Mosscap is trying to learn about human society on its quest as the robot ambassador. And so it feels like Mosscap is a little bit more of the protagonist in this novella, analyzing Mosscap's own sentience or consciousness and what makes up personhood, I suppose. Even if you're a robot, you know, the concept of personhood is a large theme in this, and I think that I did still enjoy this one. I didn't enjoy it as much as A Psalm for the Wild-Built, but I really loved it. I loved the continued world building that we got. I think this one actually gave us the most world building, and I loved the ending, although I am really bummed that we're not getting any more in this universe. I really wish that there would be more novellas or full novels in this universe. I love the characters and I love the world, and I just want to see more. So I gave this one 4 stars, and I did love this duology. I'm really happy I read it now at this point in my life, and I think it would be very healing and relatable to a lot of people. So that was A Prayer for the Crown Shy, and that is the Monk and Robot duology. The next book that I read is The River Has Roots by Amala Motar. This is a novella, and again feels very folklore inspired. The story follows 2 sisters who live in a small town on the edge of Fairy. Their family has a long-standing tradition of singing to the willow trees that line this river on the edge of Fairy, and the trees produce magic which fills the river river, and so the river is enchanted, the trees are enchanted. It is a very whimsical setting. It can be very dreamy. The magic system is a little weird. I'm not even really gonna get into it. And like I said, there's fae in this as well because one of the sisters is courting a fae. And their courtship and romance is probably my favorite part of this. I think the dynamic between them is just beautiful, especially since the fae doesn't always take a human form, but sometimes is an owl or a breeze, a storm, or other things like that. And so it is very whimsical again with the fae and the magic and everything. Unfortunately, this didn't work for me, and I'm really bummed because this author was one of the authors who wrote This Is How You Lose the Time War, and so I was really hoping I would love this because I loved This Is How You Lose the Time War. Unfortunately, this just didn't resonate with me, and I think it would have if it were just longer. I think it could have added 150 pages to elaborate more on the world building, on the magic, to see more of the dynamic with the sisters, to see more of the romance, to kind of draw out the conflict a little bit more as well, because there is a conflict in here. In some cases, less is not more, and I do think that this one was a little too short for it to really realize its full potential, and I wish it was longer. I'm very much in the minority on this. I think a lot of people really love this. It's been praised super highly by everyone I follow, so again, I'm kind of the outlier on this. I gave this one 3 stars. I really think I would have given it higher if it were just longer. I think it just didn't have enough time, that's all. But that is The River Has Roots. The last book that I read this month is The Geographer's Map to Romance by India Holton. This is the second book in the Love's Academic series, but kind of the way that romance series are, where there's different couples in each book, it's just connected characters, so you can read this as a standalone. The first one was The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love. I personally really liked this one, more than this one actually. I do recommend you read The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love. It was very good. For context on the world, this is basically our world in a historical setting, but there's magic and fantasy creatures and things like that. So this follows 2 geography professors at Oxford University who are actually married because they had a marriage of convenience. They had been friends for a long time and studied in university together, but they both kind of needed something through marriage, and they decided to get married for convenience. But it was more a marriage of inconvenience because neither of them really got what they wanted out of the marriage, and it kind of fizzled out, although they're technically still married because divorce isn't really a thing. So in this story, the 2 of them are sent out on assignment to deal with some thaumaturgic, magical anomaly event situation. But it basically just follows the estranged pair of them as they start to kind of rebuild their friendship and heal the damage that has been caused over time. It is a really cute book, and I loved the romance between the 2 of them, but some of the world building, as you can tell by my tone, is just a little bit like far-fetched. And the stakes in this felt simultaneously too low, but also too high. So it was a little bit of like tonal disparity between being too silly and then being too serious. So you don't really know where to fall in terms of the tone. I did love the romance with this, and I think that if you enjoy historical romance, you probably really like this one. There's so much yearning. It's such a slow burn. If you like a slow yearning dynamic where the 2 of them are just so in love with each other but they won't admit it, this one is really cute. I did really like it. I only gave it 3.5 stars, which is actually perfectly fine. It's a perfectly serviceable rating. The only reason I didn't rate it higher was because I just found some of the world building and the magic and the plot just kind of a little vague. And that was The Geographer's Map to Romance. So that's all the books that I read this month. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. It means a lot to me that you're here. If you don't know what to comment down below, drop the teacup or teapot or one of those emojis in my hand to symbolize Dex the Tea Monk. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!